finished with looking at what happens with your physiology, VO2 max, muscle strength, power, those things as you train. Today we're going to look at age changes, differences between genders, sexes. Before we get started, just a reminder on our test, it could be the 21st, it could be the 26th, so just be aware of that. I'll let you know as we get closer and know exactly what we will be doing. The test is multiple choice, all multiple choice. It will be helpful if you have, during class, you've been writing down examples from class, things more than what's on the PowerPoints, because what's up there might not explain things very well. If that's all you have, you're probably not going to do very well. So just keep that in mind. Okay? All right.
Will there be a review session?
Say again.
Will there be like a review session?
Review session? No. I'll try to have a review sheet. Okay. All right. So we're going to start by looking at children, and then we'll look at older adults. So when we look at children, let's take a look at these three charts here. One thing that I couldn't get to show up on these charts is what each of them is showing. This one is running speed at 100 meters for 100 meters. The middle one is running speed for 400 meters. So that would be something good to write down. And this one is running speed for 1,500 meters, so about a mile. So 100 meters, 400 meters, 1,500, which is about a mile. And one of the things that you should see is that whether you're at a very short distance, not as short a distance, or longer distance, as children age and get into puberty and so forth, their running speed increases. They're getting faster. Okay? So that's pretty clear. And another thing that should be pretty clear from these charts, if you look up here, we see the boys are marked with the solid dots, the girls are marked with the clear dots. You see that the boys are faster than the girls, but when does it start? Look at age 10. Look at age 10, look at age 10, they're about the same. Puberty starts around age 12, which is when you start to see differences. And you see differences get even bigger as they get older. So before puberty, males and females, running speed tends to be similar. Once they hit puberty, then you start to see the differences. And males, as it says, are about 8 to 15% faster than females. And that maintains itself throughout adulthood. I mean, you look at the world records in track and field, the males are faster than females. And we'll talk about reasons for that in a little bit. Last thing we see here is that you don't see as big a differences in the longer distance between males and females. So the difference between the sexes isn't as great. That one tends to look similar. But this one especially, and in fact with ultra distances, I mean the world record, I think for the long distance swim is held by a woman, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. So, looking at their fitness levels, one thing to keep in mind with children that we talked about before is that it's hard to get a max VO2 with children, because in order to get a max VO2, that's to exhaustion, as hard as you could go. Children won't do that. Most of them have a hard time actually pushing themselves to that limit. And so what we tend to talk about with children is peak VO2. Okay, so the highest rate at which a child can consume oxygen during exercise. Okay, just slightly different than a max VO2. Things that have been measured in children. Liters per minute. How much oxygen are they consuming per minute during exercise? That's what they call an absolute VO2. And you see both males and females increase from ages 8 to 18. Why do you disappear on me? And you should also see that males have a greater increase than females. If we consider their body weight, okay, and considering body weight is, remember that formula is the formula for VO2 max, the milliliters per kilogram per minute. We just don't call it VO2 max here. When we consider, just think of it this way for children, when you consider their body weight as well as their absolute VO2, you see that males tend to stay pretty steady, about 48 to 50 milliliters per kilogram per minute as they get older. Females, however, tend to decline. Now look where it starts to decline. It starts to decline at puberty. What happens at puberty with females? Getting exactly, they're getting their menstrual cycle, they're getting more fat. So with that increase in fat, that tends to have a negative impact on their aerobic fitness. Okay? Higher percentage of their body is in body fat than muscle mass. Now, overall, think back to when we were looking at our changes, what happens to our body with training. When we consider aerobic fitness, 3 things affect it. You can look at pulmonary changes, you can look at cardiorespiratory changes, and then you can look at the peripheral arteries and stuff like that, those kinds of changes. So that's what we'll look at right now. All right, so first of all, pulmonary changes. So we're looking at the lungs and the chest cavity. Males tend to have a greater thoracic growth and muscle mass, childhood through adolescence, than females. In other words, their lungs are larger. If you've got bigger lungs, you can hold more oxygen. Oxygen is related to aerobic fitness, so you're going to have better peak aerobic fitness. They also, well, because of that, they have a 25% greater lung volume. So lungs are larger, can take in more oxygen. Children in general tend to have greater respiratory rates than adults. In other words, they breathe more times per minute than adults, even at rest. Okay, that's what respiratory rate is. How many times do they breathe during a minute? So they're going to need, in exercise, they're going to need to take more breaths per minute, or even at rest, than adults. Okay, that tends to be a reason why they don't perform as well as adults. This will be fun if we do this all the time. Even as adults, females have a lower resting diffusion capacity than males. What's a diffusion capacity? We're talking about pulmonary things. So what is diffusion capacity when we talk about aerobic fitness? What would that be? Any ideas? Yeah.
How much oxygen your body is getting?
Okay, good. Exactly. How much oxygen your body is getting from the lungs. So yeah, your body can take in, your lungs take in oxygen, but it has to diffuse out to the bloodstream. That's what your diffusion capacity is. So females have a lower resting diffusion capacity than males. But what's interesting is that for adults, male and female, there's no difference in the exercise diffusion. So that's not causing as big a difference between males and females as some other things will be. All right? Especially the lung capacity. So let's look at the cardiorespiratory system. Females have a higher resting heart rate than males in general. And that is related a lot to our sex hormones. Those cause those kinds of neural differences in the heart rate. It's just, it causes more electrical stimulation, the hormones that we have, than males. Okay? So that's not going to change. Now, for children, there is no difference in their max heart rate between males and females in exercise. Okay? Now, for children, what it says there, 200 beats per minute. Yep. You all know 220 minus your age tends to be your max heart rate. For children, though, it's right at around 200. So you don't, for a 10-year-old, you don't take 220 minus 10 and say, well, your max heart rate should be 210. Tends to stay around 200. So, the thing is, with most kids, they don't even get up there anyway. So it's not a major thing if you're telling kids, 220 minus your age is their max heart rate. But you should know as experts that's not the case. Okay? For males, they have a greater cardiac output than females. And males have greater muscle mass, including in the heart, which enhances their stroke volume. Males have a greater stroke volume than females. Remember what stroke volume is. Here's your heart. Every time it beats, how much blood is pumped out. That's your stroke volume. Well, if you got a bigger muscle, your heart muscle is bigger, you're going to pump out more blood. And that's what males have. Okay? That leads to, your stroke volume, okay? Another thing males have is that by the age of 16, they have greater hemoglobin counts than females. Hemoglobin is what's in the blood that carries the oxygen. So if you've ever been anemic, one of the things they check is your hemoglobin count. If it's low, that means that you're not able to carry as much oxygen around your body, because hemoglobin does that. So when you have greater hemoglobin counts, that's going to help with your oxygen enhancement and getting to the blood. Okay. All right. So peripheral level, we don't know as much about peripherally what happens, but one of the things we have an idea about is that your max arterial venous oxygen consumption is greater for males starting during adolescence. Now, what the heck is that? Max arterial venous oxygen consumption. Remember, we're talking about peripheral adjustments. So peripheral would be where? We've talked about the lungs, we've talked about the heart. Peripheral is, in the body, in the muscles. Okay, so these are those arteries that get to the muscles. The oxygen that is diffused from those arteries tends to be greater in males than in females. Okay? So it's your oxygen extraction at the muscles, and that tends to be greater for males than females. So you can see you have several things that are contributing to the differences between males and females on aerobic fitness. Okay. Well, what about high intensity exercise? Things we just talked about this last time. Things like power. So if we look at peak power, if we think in terms of the Wingate test, remember we saw the guy doing the bicycle test, going all out. If it's a 10-second test, we're talking about the peak power. So if you get a child on a bicycle and they're doing the 10-second, going as hard as they can, hard, this is what we're testing, peak power. And with peak power, we're looking at the use of the phosphagen system. Remember, 0 to 10 seconds. The phosphagen energy system. So if we look at this, we see that females have a big increase, 270%, between ages 7 to 16. Part of that might be muscle mass, part of that might just be, getting used to doing it. Males have a 380% increase. So that's a huge increase. But if you look at a child, if you take a child like at 10 years of age, which after 10 years of age it starts to improve, a child's power is only 30% of an adult's. So it makes huge increases as we go through ages 18 to 20. So that's peak power. That's that test 0 to 10 seconds. Now if we look a little longer, mean power would be a 30-second Wingate test. So they're on the bicycle and they're going for 30 seconds, going as hard as they can. So in that case, up here, we're talking about their use of the phosphagen system. Here we're talking about, now we're getting into the anaerobic glycolytic system. Gone past the phosphagen alone, or maximally. So here, with our peak power, we see that it increases with age, and with males, it tends to be bigger than females, starting right around puberty again. And you can probably guess that has a lot to do with muscle mass. Changes in muscle mass during that time. Males tend to have greater muscle mass than females. All right, so that's power. We look at strength and muscle size. From birth, males have more muscle mass than females. And even at the elite level, compare similar athletes from the same sport, males and females. Females will have less muscle mass. But what's interesting is that females tend to have more type 1 fibers. Which ones are those? The slow twitch or the fast twitch? Slow twitch. Okay. So that's one of the reasons why at extreme endurance activities like that swimming across the English Channel, females could outperform males in that way. Now what they found is that with children, they tend to have about 10% of their muscles that are undefined, so they're not really type 1, they're not really type 2 for a while. And then once they hit puberty, then they start to go toward one or the other. And with females, you tend to have more of those that are moving toward the type 1 fibers than males will have, those undefined ones. For both males and females, strength will increase through about age 14. And for males especially, that increase is due, they're going to have a greater increase in strength than females. And again, probably due to the muscle mass differences. Now keep in mind, we're talking about generalities. You may know twins, for some reason, male and female twins, who female tends to outperform the male in various things. That happens, that's just differences. Okay? Not always the same. All right, so if you want to do some training, child says, I want to do some aerobic training. Some things to keep in mind. Aerobic training can be effective and safe before puberty. So children who like to go and run with their parents or whatever, or they become an adolescent, they can certainly do that. So they're doing it safely. And how do we do it safely? What were the guidelines for adults for getting fitness results aerobically? Okay, 60 to 70%. How long? Anybody remember? Yeah, 23, I think 15 to 20 it was, even something like that. Okay, so we're looking at children can actually exercise at a higher percentage of their max heart rate and do it safely. And they can even go longer and do it safely, which is absolutely fascinating. There might be some reasons why you might not want to do that if we're talking about the joints and those kinds of things. So that's something to keep in mind. And also motivation-wise, attention span-wise, this might not be able to keep them going that long. Let's just put it that way. Okay, but this can be done and be done safely. Okay, what about some high-intensity training? Maybe some Tabata training, some circuit training, some interval training, strength training, power training. Again, it can be safe and effective. And sometimes it's even better tolerated than endurance training. I think because what we just talked about. I mean, kids don't, number one, their attention span doesn't work very well for this long. Kids tend to exercise in spurts. That's just what they do. They'll go hard and then rest, and then go hard and rest. It's very much interval training, Tabata training is very much like what they do in natural play. So that may be why they tolerate this better. Fast, short duration bouts, like interval training, Tabatas, and it can also improve aerobic power. We're going to look at some guidelines in just a minute. Resistance training in children. Oh, this will be cool. Has anybody ever heard that you shouldn't do weight training with kids? Okay, probably a lot of you. Yep. Well, let's take a look at this. Hopefully I get it to pull up. Oh, no, no. Oh, rats. Where'd you go? It is not here. Doggone it. Let's look at this one. I don't know what this one is.
I only want you to do it one time, because I don't want you to get tired, because if you can do it once, we'll add 5 or 10 more pounds and see if you can do it again. But right now you have the bars 45, 55, 65, 75 pounds. Make sure you do
Probably what he
the
weighs.
way I told you to do it. You understand? Squat down, push your ass down, drive through your hips and your heels. Straight back. Ready? Go on, try it. All right. Add some more weight on there. Get some 5s. So now he's going to take the 5s off and put 10s on, which will add 10 more pounds. So that'll be what, 85 pounds? Just come on, put them on. Yeah, it'll be 85 pounds. That's good. They're not going to go nowhere. Come on,
Okay,
Dave.
let's look at this one. I don't know.
Go ahead, Princess.
Oh, that's not
Shall
the
we
one.
now?
No.
Flip it, please.
All right. Let me see if I can find this, because this is not what I wanted. Do this. Here we go.
You don't have to be an Olympian to enjoy the benefits of Olympic weightlifting. It's not just for adults. We've got Boris Erwin here, who's been coaching weightlifting for 15 years. Behind me, Olivia and Abby are some of the students, and Nathan is here to help with some of the demonstrations. So, Boris, how is Olympic weightlifting different from, say, powerlifting or just lifting weights in the gym?
So Olympic weightlifting sport is for kids. It increases the speed, flexibility, coordination, and mentality. This sport is good for any athlete, for track and field, wrestling, boxing, gymnastics. Well, because, like I said, it's a more athletic than powerlifting. Powerlifting is slow in motion sport, very heavy, and I don't recommend for kids. That's all.
Now, what does it take to be successful in this sport? You would know because you've trained a lot of champions.
Yes, successful sport is a perfect technique. And when you get to the child, it doesn't matter how old he is, if he starts doing a good technique and can keep on more, he will show more courage, he will heavy weights, and he will never get hurt.
I say we bring the girls in. Girls, Olivia and Abby, why don't you guys come in? Let's talk. She's still lifting weights. Look at you. Look at you. You are so strong. Okay, I heard that you are the #1 9-year-old weightlifter in the world. Is that right?
Yes.
How much fun do you have lifting weights?
A lot.
You know why you like it so much?
I like winning trophies and medals.
That's a good answer, girl. What about you? What do you dig about the sport?
I like competing and winning medals.
Are you super hyper competitive?
Yeah.
Atta girl. Okay, let's walk it back here. Let's check out Nathan's form. Okay, so come here, Boris. Let's talk a little bit. What's the first move that Big Nathan is going to do here?
Snatch.
Snatch.
It's a straight, exercise straight from the floor.
Let's see it snatch, and always safety first, right?
Yes, and key is it's best snatch 265 pounds. From the floor straight up.
Nathan, you are strong like ox, like bull.
National champion, international records man.
All right, let's see what is next. Clean and jerk.
Yes, clean and jerk.
Clean and jerk. All right, let's see that.
He was competing in the world championship already, and
Now,
this is clean and jerk.
form is perfect right there.
In great form.
Great form.
His best jump is 345 pounds.
Wow.
55 kilos overhead.
Come on in, kids. Come on, let's bring it in. Okay, so what would you suggest? Come here, my friend. What is so appealing about weightlifting for children? Why is it important for them to get started early?
When we talk now about European weightlifters, ASEAN, from China, more and more kids involved in this sport. They weight more than any adults. Just only your kids, if you work out every day, you don't have no problem. Sure, you just want to do this for fun, you'll be hurt.
And you see these guys now, but next time you see them, they might be training for the Olympics. So the Olympics coming up, yeah. So there you go. Congratulations.
Yeah, the Youth Olympic Games.
Olympic Games, yes.
Youth Olympic Games.
Go team. All right. Well,
All right, so yes, children can do resistance training. And what are some things that you just noticed from that video? What's that? Yeah, all kinds of stuff. What'd you notice? How old was the girl, did they say? 9? Okay. The youngest one, did they say how old the other one was? Was it 15? The girl was 15? Okay. So what'd you notice about them? Yeah. Okay, good. So they're doing it at different intensities. They weren't lifting the same amount of weight. All right? So that is important. Okay, what else? Yeah.
They all had a form.
Okay, good. They had good form. And that was one of the things that their coach talked about. One of the benefits of doing weight training with children is that they learn to do it correctly early. I mean, you and folks like you probably know how to lift weights correctly, or you may not and have learned some incorrect ways early, and now you're going to have to relearn ways, the correct ways to do it. Okay? It's just like anything else. You learn how to throw correctly when you're a child, you don't have to relearn it. You learn to ride a bike when you're a child, it's there. When you learn to lift weights correctly, you have it. Go into any weight room, go over to the co-rec and just watch for a while. You'll see probably at least half of the people aren't lifting weights correctly, I would say. Okay? Whether it be form, whether it be too much, and then people tend to think I have to lift a lot of weights in order to get it, and it screws up my form, and so what if it screws up my form? That is so wrong. And they think, oh great, I'm lifting a lot of weight, and they're doing all kinds of things like this, and it's not good for them. Okay, so that's a huge benefit for it. What else do you notice about them? One thing I noticed about the females in particular, and maybe compare it to the male. Body shape. What did you notice? Okay, good. Well, with the male, you saw well-defined muscles. Okay? With the females, even the older one, you didn't see that well-defined muscle. Now, you could tell that they were nice and firm and probably didn't look like most kids their age, girls their age, but still, they didn't look all bulky. And one of the big concerns of a lot of females is that they don't want to look like the female bodybuilder that we saw last time. Well, you're not going to. I mean, these kids were doing lots of weight, and they didn't look like that. Okay? So that's a big thing. All right. So, resistance training with children can be safe and effective. They need to be using correct form. They need to have good coaching. Teaching them to do it correctly, not too much weight, correct sets, reps, those kinds of things. They can improve strength anywhere from 10 to 40%, which is cool. Better to do high reps and moderate loads rather than heavier loads and low reps. So intensity level needs to be lower. The amount that they're lifting, lower, more reps for kids. Focus on that form. Before adolescence, so somewhere for females before the age of 12, 13, males a little bit older, you can have an increase in muscle size, but take a child who's training, take an adult who's training, the adult is going to increase their strength 50% more. For children, and this is part of the reason why you don't see that muscle defining as much with the girls, besides the fact that they are girls, is the fact that a lot of their improvement is due to the neural changes that are happening, the brain changes. I'm activating the correct motor units. Now think about that. That's part of the reason why it's a good idea to teach kids to lift weights correctly when they're a child, because they learn how to, okay, I learned how to do a curl correctly. I'm training my brain when I'm 10 years old. Okay, which muscle units do I need to activate? Which ones don't need to activate when I'm doing this curl? I've got it. Something that'll stay with me throughout adulthood. And that's just like any other motor skill that you're learning. Okay? All right. There's a nice table in your book. And let's see if we can take a look at it. Table 13.1. There it is. Some good guidelines to follow for children with resistance training. First of all, again, make sure your practices, your resistance training programs with children are supervised by adults who are trained. They know about weight training, they know about children. You all will know about weight training. Hopefully, when you get through with your motor development class, you'll know more about children as well. Resistance training should complement a broadly planned sport program and include specific and realistic goals for each child. So, in other words, let's not just do weight training. I mean, these children were exceptions. Most children need to do a wide variety of things. Training should take place 2 to 3 times per week on non-consecutive days. Sounds a lot like adults. A warm-up period before resistance training is important. 5 to 10 minutes of light aerobic and stretching exercises. Sounds like adults. The initial few weeks of the program should focus on developing good technique and should include completing a single set of 13 to 15 reps per exercise using light loads, less than 50%, 1 repetition max. So they're talking about focusing on the form to start with. Now, I would do that with adults too. Variety of exercises should be done. So they're talking about not just lifting weights, but rubber bands, tubing, medicine balls, free weights, child-sized ergometers, all different kinds of things. Progressive increases, 5 to 10% either in the resistance. So you go for a time, let's say I'm lifting 20 pounds of my curls, and I'm doing 2 sets of 15 reps. I'm ready to move up. You can increase the weight 10%. You could increase the number of reps 10%. Those things can be changed. That's just like adults. And then training loads should be individualized using percentages of the 1 rep max. However, that's difficult to get with children, and especially they need to have good training in order to do that first. Frankly, I would use the 10 rep way of getting a max. So what weight can they do 10 times safely? Okay. Right. And that takes us to the elderly, older adults. So when we talk about older adults, in general, we're talking about anybody around 60 or older. And hopefully this video will come up. Or it could be as old as this lady. And that didn't come up either. All right, well, let me find this. Second. Here we go.
It can be hard to find the motivation to stay in shape. That is, unless you're Ida Keeling, a 100-year-old woman from New York who's about to make you feel pretty guilty for skipping the gym this week. Keeling just broke the world record for her age group for sprinting 100 meters. It happened Saturday, April 30th at the Penn Relays in Philadelphia during the Masters Mixed 100-meter dash. Keeling may have come in last place, but she was definitely number one in the hearts of those in the crowd. She clocked in at 1 minute 17.33 seconds, setting a new record for centenarians. But it seems for Keeling, that was nothing. To celebrate, she dropped and gave the crowd 5 epic push-ups. So how does Keeling do it? If you wanted me to say something along the lines of, she eats bacon every day, you're out of luck. She told reporters, quote, eat for nutrition, not for taste. Do what you need to do, not what you want to do. Spoken like a true world record holder. For Newsbeat Social, I'm Holly Real.
That was just last year she set the record. Pretty impressive, Miss Ida. How many 100-year-old people, first of all, how many 100-year-old people do you know? Not very many. And then 100-year-olds that are running and setting world records. That's pretty cool. And they had a nice, I was watching the Penn Relays, they really played that up. She did a marvelous job and she really talked up to the reporters and stuff. It's really cool. All right, so Ida is kind of a anomaly, but it shows you what is possible even at age 100. Let's look first about why in adults, and particularly older adults, what happens and reasons for decreases in exercise capacity. Well, one, we have a decline in aerobic fitness. The VO2 max declines. Starts to decline if you're not in training. It'll start to decline as early as age 20. Mostly it's due to decreases in your max heart rate. Remember, 220 minus your age. And in cardiac output. And your max heart rate decreases because of neural changes. So the electrical stimulation in your heart changes as we get older, and your max heart rate just goes down, and so that's not going to change. Your cardiac output, that decrease in max heart rate is a big reason for the decrease in cardiac output. Your stroke volume doesn't decrease as much, but still you're going to have a little bit of that happening. Also, your skeletal muscles, they lose some of the ability to extract oxygen. When the blood gets down to the skeletal muscles, they don't have as well, they can't take oxygen from those, the blood that gets there as you get older as you could when you were younger. So that's another reason for decrease in VO2 max. Your anaerobic capacity will decline. Again, peaks at around age 20. How many of you are 20? You're peaking. Use it. Don't lose it. That decreases a lot. Anaerobic capacity will decrease a lot because of decrease in muscle mass. That has a lot to do with that. Especially in the thigh muscles. Remember, anaerobic capacity we're talking about, if you're testing it, that would be like using the Wingate test, the 30-second test. So if you have a decrease in muscle mass in your thighs, well, that's going to hurt your ability to do that kind of test. Your muscle fiber size tends to decline, and that happens mostly in the fast twitch muscles. So that contributes to that decline in anaerobic capacity. And then you're going to have strength declines around 2 to 4% per year in older and sedentary folks. Again, your decrease in muscle fiber mass, they tend to get smaller. And you also start to lose some motor units, your fast twitch motor units. Slow twitch ones don't atrophy as much as the fast twitch ones because we tend to use our slow twitch muscle fibers more in everyday activities. So just your posture, you're using, to keep your posture upright, you're using more slow twitch fibers than fast twitch. Yes?
So, saying you've been doing that for like 40 years, what happens, like, you know, after that? Like, why is your body eventually just, why is it unable to continue training?
Well, you tend to see a decrease in these things anyway as you get older. You can maintain it, they say, up until around age 40. And part of it has to do with neural changes, because even in your muscle strength and stuff, the ability to, remember, part of what you're doing is your nervous system has to recruit certain muscle fibers. And because the nervous system just declines as we get older, it can't send the same kind of signals as it used to, so that's a big part of it. Okay? And there's probably other reasons too. Okay. All right, so you see strength declines because of the muscle mass. Muscles are atrophying, especially the fast twitch, as well as the neural changes that we just talked about. All right, but you can prevent or even reverse such changes. And we've found that with like masters athletes, maybe like Ida, maybe not quite that old, but looking at masters, I believe, starts at 40, right? Some of you? I think masters level things start at age 40. With masters athletes, you can have your VO2 max can decrease half as much as if somebody is sedentary. So take a 40-year-old who's very active, working out, good, keeping their VO2 max up, versus one that isn't exercising. They're going to have half of the VO2 max is this one. Okay, so you can keep it higher, definitely if you exercise. And your anaerobic capacity and muscle strength, you can make changes in that as well. That will increase half as much when you train as you get older as somebody who's sedentary. Now, if you're sedentary, remember we talked about detraining last time, how even at your age, if you're trained right now and you're exercising and you're running and lifting weights and stuff, if something happens and you're not able to do it for 2 to 3 weeks, you're going to start to see a decline by then. These declines that we see as somebody gets older and they're not exercising as much, that's going to be just the same kind of thing. Okay? It looks a lot like the detraining things. A lot of these differences are due to changes in muscle mass that can happen. All right, so let's take one of the things, again, many of you are interested in personal fitness training, and you are ready, when you're leaving here, you want to maybe start your own fitness facility or work for somebody else. It would be a good idea if you were to get interested in working with folks my age who are older, rather than, I know many people are always interested, well, I'm going to work with college athletes and stuff, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. The problem is those jobs are few and far between and hard to get into, number one. Number two, if you end up working and you think, well, I want to do personal fitness training, and you're thinking, you know, younger people, keep in mind who has the money. Hate to think just in those terms, but older people have more money, more discretionary funds. We can afford to hire a personal trainer. And so when we talk about exercise and trying to create changes in sedentary people, this would be a good place to look. So what can happen? You take a 50-year-old who's not been exercising for a while, what can happen with that person? They can increase their aerobic capacity, their VO2 max, anywhere from 20 to 40%. That's pretty cool. A lot of their increase in their cardiac output will be because of an increased stroke volume. But also, even a bigger part, probably due to the extraction at the muscle site, at those peripheral areas. Because remember, stroke volume doesn't increase all that much. And that word should be extraction, not extractin. Extraction, T-I-O-N. Forgot to know. Anaerobic capacity can also be enhanced. And a lot of that is due to an increase in the fast twitch type 2 muscle fibers. And particularly what they found with strength training, it can especially help isometric and isokinetic strength. I don't know why it doesn't talk about isotonic strength. That seems kind of weird. But you're going to have some, first of all, of course, you'll have the neural adaptations, the ability to recruit the correct muscle fibers. Remember, that happens the first 6 to 8 weeks. That's the neural adaptations. But also, you can get some hypertrophy. The muscle fibers can actually get bigger. Somebody who's been sedentary and now you get them exercising and lifting weights and stuff, that can all happen. So, exercise prescription elderly, we're going to look at this in just a second. The goal with most folks, when they're my age, I'm talking about over age 40 and stuff, we're looking at functional capacity. Functional capacity has to do with being able to do everyday life things. Again, I used to go to Miracles Fitness, work out with people of various ages in my exercise group. I don't know how many ladies, retired ladies who came in and were exercising there, they frequently said, I want to be able to play with my grandchildren. That's not anything to do with sport. That's just having fun with their kids, being able to keep up with them, their grandkids. That's functional capacity. Being able to carry my groceries from the car into the house without getting out of breath. Being able to go up the stairs in a classroom like this without getting out of breath. Being able to do all kinds of things. You know, just going for a walk around the neighborhood without getting out of breath. That's functional capacity. And that has to do with aerobic capacity, muscular strength and endurance, flexibility, and range of motion. So all of those things are involved with that. It's not just things like the first ones, the aerobic capacity and muscular strength and endurance. Even flexibility and range of motion has to do with that.
So you just used the example of like going up the stairs without getting out of breath, but didn't you say like last week that
Yeah.
everyone is going to have that even if they aren't?
Yeah, and what happens with, so, you know, if you were to run up these stairs here and you're in good shape, maybe you have to have more stairs, but yeah, you're going to get out of breath a little bit. But if you were to keep going upstairs, you would get used to it. A person who's not in shape would not get used to it. Okay? See, because yeah, you're right. Yeah, I did say that. Okay. So for functional capacity, we're talking about low to moderate intensity of 50 to 60% of their max, VO2 max. For resistance exercises, 8 to 12 reps, 8 to 10 different exercises, so you don't want to just do one type of exercise. And, just normal, 2 to 3 times per week. So let's look at table 13.2. Exercise prescription for an older adult. Again, it talks about low functional capacity. That's what you're looking for, improvement in everyday life. So you only need to do some low intensity exercises. Here it says 40-50%. But regular things like gradual progression, interval training would be good to do with elderly people. The reason is you get them going. Actually, it has a lot to do mentally. With interval training, remember, you do something and then you rest, so you do something and rest. Instead of, okay, I'm going to do something for 20 minutes and not stop. They think, oh, I can go for a minute and then I get to rest. They think that's easier than the other. So that mentally, they tend to do that better. Elderly tend to have low muscular strength and endurance, so you want exercises for those things. Now, keep in mind, when you're working with elderly, they're going to have impaired coordination and slower reaction time. That was always one of my beefs with some of my trainers at the place I went to. They would show an exercise one time, and that'd be it. You're like, really, seriously, you're going to have to show me several times, much as somebody who's not used to working out. So you got to show it several times. That's one of the basic things that we'll learn in motor learning, is that you got to demonstrate things several times. So that helps. And with their coordination differences, that has to do with the neural changes. As we get older, our nervous system has a harder time sending clear messages to our muscles and our body in general. So they're not going to get things as quickly. Okay, so you got to be more patient with them. You're going to have more folks who are older who are at risk for disease. They might have heart disease, obesity, hypertension, arthritis, osteoporosis. I have severe arthritis in one hip, arthritis in the other hip. I can't do certain things. Nice thing about my trainers, they did a great job of adapting things for me, even in the group setting. Some things I couldn't do, so we adjusted things. Even osteoarthritis, doing low impact, low intensity exercises. Here's an important one, low heat tolerance. So that's a big thing to keep in mind when you're working with older people, is that they can't handle the heat as well as you can. By the way, that's true of children as well. And they do have a lower capacity for muscle hypertrophy and protein synthesis. So you're going to see slower improvements with them than younger folks. Okay. All right. So next time, looking at Tuesday, Monday night, you have your first biomechanics homework assignment due. There'll be another one due Wednesday night of next week. So we'll get into the biomechanics readings. Remember, those readings are on Blackboard because we're not using the chapters in your book. Okay?